Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rift News, the show you most likely watch to check if you missed anything new. Now, usually I tell you that there is something you most likely missed. And even today I do believe that will be the case. But usually we don't get the biggest patch in the history of League of Legends. And so today, we'll spend a lot of time summarizing everything that arrived in patch 10.23. But since we also got a new PvE update, we'll go through some new skins too. But now, because this patch is actually insanely long, let's get right into it. A quick note, Riot recently updated the notes to include even more changes, after people figured out some game-breaking item interactions. So there will likely be some stuff which you didn't know about. As we already know, the major new feature of this pre-patch are the new items. On paper it sounded simple. Some new items were added, some items were removed, and some were changed. But in reality, it feels as if everything was changed. And now, if you open the shop, for some lanes, it is as if you are playing a totally different game. Now, because some of these items change how entire champions behave, Riot had to adjust the base stats of the affected champions. For example, because Lich Bane no longer gives mana, Riot had to buff the mana pool of all the champions who frequently bought the item. Another example of this is Rageblade. This item got a whole new passive. It now gives you 45 on-hit physical damage for every 20% critical strike chance you have. But because this can raise the damage of your auto attacks by anything between 20 to 80%, it also got a second passive, which makes it so you can't critically strike anymore. So with this item, instead of getting a chance to deal a lot of extra damage, you deal a little bit less extra damage, but at a steady pace. Now, here's the issue. Because of her passive, Ashe can't crit anyway. And so, this item essentially just boosted her damage by 80% without giving her a negative effect. That's why Ashe is the first one in the patch notes. It's because this item legitimately raised her win rate by 10%. And to fix it, Riot basically disabled the bonus damage from her passive if she owns Jinsu's Rageblade. Right after this, there is a fix for Garen. And funnily enough, this fix is talking about some global critical damage nerfs. But you don't get to learn about these nerfs all the way until you read about all the other major item changes. So just to make it easier for all of you, let's start with the stat changes first. There are 3 things to point out. First of all, Riot is globally reducing the critical strike damage of all champions, from 200% to 175% of the normal damage. There are some exceptions, but we'll get to those. Then, Riot is changing how lifesteal effects work. There are 3 healing stats now. Lifesteal, which heals you based on your auto attack damage. Physical Vamp, which heals you based on all of your physical damage, including the physical damage of your abilities. And Omni Vamp, which heals you for all of the damage you deal. And the last big change to stats is the new cooldown reduction. This stat was renamed to Ability Haste, and it behaves in a cooler way. Each point of ability haste makes your cooldown reduction faster by 1%, meaning that if you have 50 ability haste, you would regenerate 1.5 of the spell by the time the original cooldown would finish. And if you get 100 ability haste, you essentially cut your cooldowns by half. Now with these new stats explained, all the other changes will make a lot more sense. So let's go back to the beginning again. The post starts with bunch of bug fixes, but besides the one on Ashe's passive, there is nothing important to mention here, since it is all in regards to the new item changes. Then Riot finally introduces the new shop. Honestly, I can't really describe the new UI in a way so you would immediately understand everything. This is one of the things which you need to see and use yourselves. But let me quickly explain the core new features. The biggest new feature is the recommended tab. Now, some of you may think that this behaves like the recommended tab we had before, only simplified. But that's not the case. This tab shows you items that are good for you depending on what phase of the game you are in and who you are against. So if you are heading into the late game, it will recommend items that scale well. But if you got an early advantage and you want to spend your gold early, the game will recommend something that will help you snowball. Here, I should point out that this recommended feature is recommending items based on what is popular in higher ranked games, which means that we are no longer seeing what Riot thinks is good for us, but the system is showing items that actually have good win rates. Next, there is the All tab, which shows you all items, but it also gives you the option to sort items by their recommendations for specific roles. By default, the role-specific items tab will show you your role first, but I doubt the system will realize that you are playing Thresh as AD carry from the get-go. And lastly, the new shop also has the quick buy feature. These are the panels shown on the left, and they help you buy the frequently bought items quickly. These are all the major features of the new shop, but as I already mentioned, you'll have to play with it yourself to figure out how it all works. But now, let's go through all the new items. I am aware that going through all the new items in detail would put most of you to sleep. If you want that kind of experience, I can recommend TBSkyne's brilliant video. So instead, I'll try to describe all the new items in the simplest way possible. There are the new items called Mythic items. These gain bonus stats depending on how many other completed legendary items you have, but you can only have one Mythic item. Gale Force is an item for those of you who need mobility. It has an active dash, and it gives you bonus movement speed for every other item you have. Kraken Slayer is good against tanks. It makes your every third attack deal true damage, and it gives you attack speed for every other item. Immortal Shield Bow is good against assassins. It gives you a shield once you fall below 30% health, and it gives you a lot of lifesteal and health. Sunfire Aegis gives you a lot of defensive stats, some ability power, and even some ability haste for every other item. Passively, it is just a stronger Sunfire Cape. It burns nearby enemies, but it burns them more the longer you stay near them. At maximum stacks of burn damage, your auto attacks deal extra damage against the burned enemies. Frostfire Gauntlet is nearly identical, except the burn damage from this one doesn't ramp up, and it gives you the classic slow zone on your auto attacks. Also, instead of ability haste, this one passively gives you a lot of health. Turbo Cam Tank is also a defensive item, which also burns the enemies around you. But this one gives you an active ability which gives you 75% movement speed when chasing enemies. It is incredibly powerful on someone like Rammus, or other tank junglers who rely on ganks. Passively, it gives you tenacity. Duskblade of Darkthar is still your trusty lethality item. Its passive gives you bonus damage on your next auto attack every 15 seconds. But if the target dies after you apply this extra damage, the cooldown is reset, and you become invisible. Passively, this one gives you ability haste for your other items. Eclipse is another lethality item. After you hit an enemy champion with 2 separate attacks or abilities, they take extra damage, and you get movement speed and shield. Passively, you get armor penetration from this one. Prowler's Claw is the most assassin item you can get. On top of all the lethality, and even more lethality from all the other items, this one allows you to mark an enemy and increase your damage against them by 15%. Liandry's Anguish is essentially the exact same thing as Liandry's Torment. It makes your abilities burn the enemy based on their maximum health. As a bonus, you get 5% magic penetration for every tick of this burn. And passively, this one gives you ability haste. Luden's Tempest is pretty much identical to Luden's Echo. Every 10 seconds, it makes your next ability deal extra damage to 3 nearby enemies. But it also gives you 30% movement speed. Passively, it gives you magic penetration. Everfrost is a great item for kiting enemies. It gives you extra active ability that damages and slows enemies in front of you. If you hit them with the center of this ability, it roots them instead. Passively, this item gives you a lot of ability power. Then there is Hextech Rocket Belt, which is pretty much the same as the old item. It gives mages mobility similar to Gale Force. But on top of the dash, it gives you 75% movement speed when chasing enemies. Passively, it gives you magic penetration. Riftmaker gives you a lot of ability power, magic penetration, and Omnivamp. It also gives you 3% extra damage for every second you spend in combat. At 5 stacks, this bonus damage becomes true damage. Night Harvester is meant for mage assassins who can chain kills. Every 60 seconds, your next damage against a champion deals extra magic damage. This has a separate cooldown for each enemy champion. And passively, this item gives you ability haste. Trinity Force remains similar to its original form. It gives you movement speed when you auto-attack something, it gives you stacking damage when you hit enemy champions, and it deals extra damage after you use an ability. Passively, it gives you 10% attack speed for every other item. Gore Drinker allows you to jump into the middle of the enemy team and survive for a while. Its active ability damages everyone around you, and heals you based on your missing health. It also gives you extra attack damage the lower on health you are. Passively, on top of some nice health and attack damage, it gives you ability haste. Stride Breaker is also a bruiser item, which gives you a short dash that slows nearby enemies. It gives you a tiny speed boost whenever you deal physical damage, and it gives you even more movement speed for every other item you have. Divine Thunderer is another bruiser-ish item, aimed at countering tanks. After using an ability, your next attack deals bonus damage based on the enemy's maximum health. It also passively gives you extra armor penetration and magic penetration. Shirelia's Battle Song is nearly identical to the original Shirelia's item. It gives you some health and ability haste, but it also has an active ability which gives everyone around you movement speed, as well as some extra damage on your allies' next attacks. Passively, it gives you quite a lot of movement speed. Locket of the Iron Solari is also nearly the same. On top of the defensive stats and the defensive aura, its active ability gives your allies a shield. It passively boosts the defensive value of your aura by 2 armor and magic resistance for every item you have. So this is the only item with passive scaling that also helps your allies. Moonstone Renewer has quite the supportive trait. Every 2 seconds, when you interact with a champion, be it ally or enemy, you heal the most wounded nearby ally, and this healing is increased the longer you stay in combat. Passively, it gives you ability haste. And for the last mythic item, we have Imperial Mantle, a defensive support item, which gives your crowd control abilities extra damage, and it makes your abilities mark the enemy for even more damage from your allies. Passively, this item gives you ability power for every other legendary item you have. These were all the mythic items in the game. And honestly, you should pay attention to these the most. Depending on what item you pick, it really makes the gameplay entirely different. And right now, just picking random champions and see how they interact with the new items is the most fun you can have in the preseason. Now, because the new legendary items, and really all the other items that are not mythic items, are not that important, I'll go through them even faster. These are the items you get to fill up the rest of your inventory. The Collector executes enemies below 5% health and gives you extra gold. Navori Quick Blades make your critical strikes reduce the cooldown on your basic abilities. Force of Nature is a massive anti-magic defense item, just like it was in the old days. Serpent's Fang is an anti-shield item, it's a must-buy against Janna. Horizon Focus makes your long-range skill shots reveal enemies. Cosmic Drive is a big ability haste item. Demonic Embrace makes your abilities burn for extra damage and give you defensive stats. Sorilda's Gurge is an AD Rylai's Scepter. Silvermare Dawn is an upgraded Quicksilver Sash. Kempak Chainsword is the new AD Grievous Wounds item. Kempak Purifier is the new AP Grievous Wounds item. Staff of the Flowing Water gives your support some movement speed. And finally, there are the new Ward Stones. You can only buy these after you get level 13, and they upgrade after you place down 20 wards. As they upgrade, they give you ability haste. They increase your cap of how many wards you can have, and they even give you some movement speed. In fact, the final form of the Ward Stone is really powerful for a support item, so you won't feel like you are wasting space in your inventory. On the other hand, it wouldn't be surprising to see other laners also buying this. And finally, for the big item news, we have the changed legendary items. Once again, here's the quick summary. Mortal Reminder is the Marksman Grievous Wounds item. Jinsu's Rageblade, as we mentioned, gives you big extra damage on hit, but it prevents you from critting. Phantom Dancer now gives you stacking movement speed from your auto attacks. Lord Dominic's Regards is an anti-tank item. Essence Reaver now builds from Sheen, so its mana regeneration is a Sheen effect. Our trusty Infinity Edge makes your crit damage scale from crit chance. Mana Moon now gives you ability haste, and it doesn't give you stacks if you don't hit a target with your abilities, which also means that the Muramana upgrade requires less stacks. Archangel Staff no longer regenerates mana, and it also doesn't give you free stacks for casting, but in return its damage from mana was greatly increased. Same goes for Seraph's Embrace. Lichbane doesn't give mana, but it deals more damage. Blade of the Ruined King now gives you the movement speed after you hit someone 3 times. Black Cleaver now has an execute effect. Ravenous Hydra now also procs on abilities, but it lost the active ability. Same goes for Titanic Hydra, but instead of abilities, you can proc Titanic Hydra with ranged attacks. Wit's End no longer heals you, but it gives you movement speed. Maw of Malmortius only gives you the magic shield now. Death's Dance now only converts physical damage into the bleed, and you can only cleanse the bleed with kills. The shield from Sterak's Gage scales with the number of enemies around you, and it works for ranged champions too. The active ability on Randuin's Omen also decreases attack damage and crit damage. It also passively decreases all damage from basic attacks. Frozen Heart is exactly the same, but it also reduces damage taken from basic attacks. Gargoyle Stoneplate now has a new active ability. Instead of massive defensive stats, it gives you a massive shield. Abyssal Mask now increases damage taken on immobilized enemies. Thornmail now stacks with Bramble Vest, and it allows you to apply grievous wounds. Reflect Only Rammus is a thing now. Zeke's Convergence now gives your linked ally extra on-hit damage on enemies you immobilized. King's Vow lost a lot of its utility stats, but the redirected damage was greatly increased. Morellonomicon is your go-to magic grievous wounds item. And finally, Sanguine Blade gives you a lot of extra lethality and attack speed if you are in a 1v1 scenario. These were the bigger item changes worth mentioning. After this, the patch notes spew out some balancing, which isn't really that important in the grand scheme. And then it goes through the rest of the items. I don't want to go through all of these, because most of them are just lesser versions of the big mythic or legendary items. However, there are some exceptions we need to have a look at. First of all, there are the new jungling items, the blue one and the red one. Now, these two items are exactly the same. They both give you bonus damage in the jungle, they give you bonus XP in the jungle, and they regenerate your mana by the exact same amount. But they each have a different upgrade. With the blue one, after you smite 5 times, you get Chilling Smite, which is exactly the same as the old one. And with the red one, after 5 smites, you get Challenging Smite. And here we get some tiny differences. The bonus true damage is still there, but the debuff on enemy champions can be refreshed with your basic attacks or your abilities. Also, it will now tell you how much damage you prevented with the smite in combat text. But that's really it for junglers. So now the only choice you need to make is, do you want Chilling or Challenging Smite? And finally, let's quickly have a look at some of the noteworthy starting items. Dark Seal is now a good starting item for those who don't need mana. Doran's Blade now gives Omnivamp, so it can be used by anyone. Doran's Ring regenerates mana on last hits, and if you are full mana, or if you don't have mana at all, it heals you instead. So again, Doran's Ring can be used by anyone. And finally, Tear of the Goddess became a starting item. It gives you bonus damage against minions to help you with last hitting. But more importantly, it allows you to start stacking your mana early. The downside is that it won't give you any offensive or defensive stats. You only get mana sustain, so it is up to you to use it well. Finally, that is it for items. Now the patch goes through some rune changes. Here, most of it is just balance changes, with only Presence of Mind being reworked. Presence of Mind doesn't give you resources on takedowns anymore. Instead, it gives you tiny bit of resources back every time you attack the enemy. And this takes us to the champion changes. We will skip a lot of these because, again, most of it is just balancing. But still, some champions got bigger changes. First of all, as we mentioned at the beginning of the video, critical strike damage was globally changed. So all marksmen who relied on critical strikes got tweaked. This includes champions like Tryndamere, Yasuo or Yone. Similarly, as we already mentioned, because Sheen doesn't give mana anymore, all casters who used it got their mana boosted by 20. Here is the full list of all the affected champions. Next, all of Katarina's abilities now apply on-hit effects, including every dagger of her ultimate, although at 25% efficiency. Ornn now gains bonus defensive stats for each mythic item he upgraded into a masterwork. Victor no longer starts with a hex core in his inventory. Instead, you earn hex fragments from minion kills or champion takedowns. And at 100 hex fragments, you can evolve an ability. And lastly, a lot of Twitch's scaling and damage got converted into AP. So either Hybrid Twitch will become a thing, or AP Twitch will turn his poison pool into a nightmare. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for the patch notes. Congratulations, I literally saved you at least an hour of reading. And I am not over-exaggerating. So now, to finish off this video, let's have a look at some skins and stuff. First of all, with this patch, all the new Battlecast skins will be released. This includes Nasus, Zac, Jace, Singed and Yorick, as well as Victorious Lucian if you ended the season in gold or above. And for TFT, this patch will release all the KDA Little Legends. But then, on PBE, Riot already revealed even more skins. First, they revealed the second to last prestige skin of 2020, Star Guardian Soraka. Unfortunately, I have to say, I was looking forward to a prestige skin for Soraka. But this Star Guardian skin came out of nowhere, and not in a good way. I was hoping for Soraka to get a brand new skin and a prestige version with that. But here, because we didn't even get any new Star Guardian skins, a Star Guardian prestige skin feels out of place. And what's worse, the community doesn't even like it that much. It is exactly the same as normal Star Guardian Soraka, only this one has champagne pink abilities. Thankfully, the other new skins on PBE saved the day, as Riot revealed a lot of new Cosmic skins, which are always popular. We have Cosmic Flight Anivia, who's using Targonian mountains for her walls. Cosmic Invoker Illaoi, who is a really awesome surprise, because Illaoi usually doesn't get a lot of skins. Cosmic Destiny Nami, who actually throws squinks at you. Cosmic Huntress Nidalee, who in my opinion is the weakest of these skins, but her cat form is still amazing. Cosmic Charger Hecarim, who was turned into an archer with this skin. Cosmic Hunter Varus, who plays his own counterpart to the Darkstar version. Cosmic Devourer Vladimir, who is on the brink of being turned into a Darkstar entity. Cosmic Sting Skarner, who looks absolutely gorgeous. And finally, we have Dark Cosmic Lysandra, a skin that looks quite normal, until you see her ultimate. Of course, all of the skins we just mentioned got a lot of chroma skins as well. But that is going to be it for this episode of Rift News. There is nothing else to really mention here. We could talk about the fact that KDA released a concept song featuring Evelynn, but I'm not gonna do that, because monetization is a fragile thing.